Hello and welcome. My name is meaningless, they, he, she, and today we are looking at and talking about the comic book edition of the essay, The Abolition of Work, written by Bob Black and illustrated by Bruno Borges. The original essay was completed in 1985, and the illustrations indicate they were finished in 2007. This edition was published by Floating World Comics in 2023. Content notes for nudity, childbirth, sex, comparing workers to slaves, and a feather in a headband. Flipping to the back of the book, Bob Black is described as, quote, born January 4, 1951, is an American anarchist and author. He is the author of the book The Abolition of Work and Other Essays, Beneath the Underground, Friendly Fire, Anarchy After Leftism, and Defacing the Currency, and numerous political essays, unquote. The book also describes Bruno Borges as, quote, Lisbon, Portugal, 1976, is a painter, illustrator, and comic artist. He has been involved with galleries, artistic projects, and publishers since the year 2000. Founding member of the satiric zine Baracco, and part of the Oficina Arara crew. He currently runs the workshop O Gorilla, dedicated to troglodyte forms of expression in art, end quote. What kinds of keywords came to mind reading this short volume? Work, play, anarchism, ethics, health, trolling, and disruption. The synopsis section of the Wikipedia entry for The Abolition of Work is, quote, in the essay, Black argues for the abolition of the producer and consumer-based society. Quote, in the essay, Black argues for the abolition of the producer and consumer-based society where Black contends all of life is devoted to the production and consumption of commodities. Attacking Marxist state socialism as much as liberal capitalism, Black argues that the only way for humans to be free is to reclaim their time from jobs and employment, instead turning necessary subsistence tasks into free play done voluntarily, an approach referred to as, quote, ludic. The essay argues that no one should ever work, because work, defined as compulsory productive activity enforced by economic or political means, is the source of most of the misery in the world. Black denounces work for its compulsion and for the forms it takes, as subordination to a boss, as a job, which turns a potentially enjoyable task into a meaningless chore, for the degradation imposed by systems of work discipline, and for the large number of work-related deaths and injuries, which Black characterizes as homicide. He views the subordination enacted in workplaces as a mockery of freedom, and denounces as hypocrites the various theorists who support freedom while supporting work. Subordination in work, Black alleges, makes people stupid and creates fear of freedom. Because of work, people become accustomed to rigidity and regularity and do not have the time for friendship or meaningful activity. Many workers, he contends, are dissatisfied with work, as evidenced by absenteeism, gold-breaking, embezzlement, and sabotage, so that what he says should be uncontroversial. However, it is controversial only because people are too close to the work system to see its flaws. Play, in contrast, is not necessarily rule-governed, and more important, it is performed voluntarily, in complete freedom for the satisfaction of engaging in the activity itself. But since intrinsically satisfying activity is not necessary and unproductive, productive play is possible, and if generalized, might give rise to a gift economy. Black points out the hunter-gatherer societies are typified by play in the sense of productive play, a view he backs up with work of anthropologist Marshall Sahlins in his essay The Original Affluent Society, reprinted in his book Stone Age Economics, 1971. Black has reiterated the interpretation of the ethnographic record, this time with citations and references in Primitive Affluence, reprinted in his book Friendly Fire, Autonomedia, 1994, and in Nightmares of Reason, a critique of Murray Bookchin posted at theanarchistlibrary.org. Black responds to the criticism, argued for instance by libertarian David Ramsey Steele, that work, if not simply effort or energy, is necessary to get important but unpleasant tasks done, by contending that much work now currently done is unnecessary, because it only serves the purpose of social control and economic exploitation. Black has responded that most important tasks can be rendered ludic or salvaged by being turned into game-like and craft-like activities, and secondly, that the vast majority of work does not need doing at all. The latter tasks are unnecessary because they only serve functions of commerce and social control that exist only to maintain the work systems as a whole. As for what is left, he advocates Charles Fourier's approach of arranging activities so that people will want to do them. He is also skeptical but open-minded about the possibility of eliminating work through labor-saving technologies, which in his opinion have so far never reduced work and often de-skilled and debased workers. As he sees it, the political left has for the most part failed to acknowledge as revolutionary the a critique of work, limiting itself to the critique of wage labor. The left, he contends, by glorifying the dignity of labor, has endorsed work itself and also the work ethic. Black has often criticized leftism, especially Marxism, but he does not consider anarchism, which he espouses, as always advocating an understanding of work, which is consistent with his critiques of work. Black looks favorably, if critically, on a text such as The Right to be Greedy by the Situationalist Influence Collective for Ourselves. He wrote a preface for the Lumpanic's Unlimited reprint edition, which attempts to synthesize the post-moral individualism of Max Stirner, the ego and its own, with what appears to be an egalitarian anarcho-communism. What has been called zero work remains controversial on the left and among anarchists." End quote. Looking at the art of this graphic novel adaptation, it is certainly a testament to how even a very simple and rudimental art style can be pulled off fairly well. It certainly won't be to everyone's taste, but I found it engaging and the confident/dramatic lines very well done. The only quibble I would come up with is that I do think that the comics should probably have been lettered with mixed taste. Obviously, all caps is traditional for comics, but as this adaptation leads more towards the blocks of text side and the text is very large, it just felt like I was being yelled at and it was hard to read, which obviously is not my reaction to the use of all caps in most comic situations. Looking at the writing side of things as someone interested in recontextualizing my relationship with work, laziness, play, and community, among many other things, I couldn't not pick up this book. That said, I am still a novice, and so I'm not going to pretend that I have much beyond the most rudimental understanding of the discourse that this essay has been part of for, once again, longer than I've been alive. Not to mention every personal action the author has ever taken. Although I was not surprised after reading this text that my casual Googling turned up a lot of people commiserating about how they feel that Bob Black is an asshole and a troll. Because while I am interested in forming a more deeply nuanced personal opinion that will likely matter largely only to myself, my initial impression reading this book was that this was an important piece in the diversity of tactics, but that the person writing it would probably not be the most amiable person to be around. Because we really need to reconsider our relationship to work and productivity before we kill ourselves. Across the political spectrum of so-called North America, from left to right, society-wide, the power of the Protestant work ethic rules on. And it's only been since I started learning more about leftism intersecting with disability that I began to realize just how exclusionary, damaging, and generally ill-thought-out pro-work indoctrination really was. My only comfort is that I am not a terribly original creature, so any ideas I have are ones that are growing in popularity across my generation. On a final note, I would also point out that this is certainly an essay of ideas, and one should not expect this to be a practical how-to guide to actually reach a workless society, if such a thing is even possible, although Black does have a nice list of all the most useless occupations. Going through the intersections I try and highlight with each of my reviews, class was obviously a focus of the text and did not disappoint in the way that it lambasts the burden of work. Looking at gender and sexuality, there was some discussion of reproductive labor and the potential of family abolition. Quote, "By abolishing wage labor and achieving full unemployment, we undermine the sexual division of labor. The nuclear family, as we know, it is an inevitable adaptation to the division of labor imposed by modern wage work." End quote. Although overall it still felt pretty straight and binary. Looking at race, obviously I'm a white settler, so my own perspective has limitations, but I feel like both Black and Borges are leaning into something like the noble savage stereotype. Particularly in the illustrations, it felt like white was the norm, and only depictions of, quote, primitives seemed to show people of darker skin tone or wearing some stereotype of, quote, native attire. Not to mention the equating of working for wages under capitalism with slavery. Most surprisingly, especially considering my own entry into the anti-work discourse, the fact that our fully able-bodied selves are fleeting, if existent at all, is not held up as a reason to not fetishize work. To conclude, as I often say, nothing on review is a must-read. I found this book a good catalyst to engage me in some conversations IRL and remind me to do more reading on the topic. Much like with Das Kapital, I feel like the total diverse discourse on a topic, particularly what's being said in the places/times I'm living in, is more interesting/important than holding on too tightly to the so-called classics. But I want to consume it all. Bye y'all, keep reading Unorganized and Capitalist Oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.